Every one of these 10 vans was built to leave the pavement, and every one of them proves that Japan never stopped overbuilding even its most ordinary-looking vehicles. From kei-class microvans smaller than your daily commuter, to a minivan with a mid-mounted, sideways engine borrowed from a rally car, this list runs from the tiniest four-wheel drive cargo van ever sold to the most genuinely capable family hauler Mitsubishi ever built. Some of these you've heard of. Most of them you haven't. And that's exactly the point. Stick around because the badge engineering twist at number 6 alone is worth the watch. Number 10. Toyota HiAce. Toyota built a genuine part-time four-wheel drive HiAce more than 4 decades ago, and it wasn't a marketing gimmick tacked on to sell a few extra units. It used a 2-speed transfer case borrowed straight from Toyota's truck division, the same engineering group responsible for the Land Cruiser and Hilux, meaning the same low-range gearing philosophy that let a Land Cruiser crawl over boulders also lived under the floor of an ordinary delivery van. The third-generation H50 HiAce launched in December 1982 with a redesigned aerodynamic body, and Toyota added a genuine part-time four-wheel drive option to the van and wagon lineup in an August 1985 running change, right as Toyota was pushing four-wheel drive technology across its entire commercial lineup, from pickups to vans, in response to demand from remote construction crews, utility fleets, and rural delivery operators who needed a cargo van that could actually leave the pavement without stranding a shipment halfway up a logging road. Toyota didn't stop at one generation either. Four-wheel drive. HiAce variants continued through the H100 and H200 generations, refining the transfer case and suspension geometry to handle added cargo weight. While American and European van makers were still bolting front-wheel drive systems onto minivans marketed as all-weather capable, systems built for slightly slick pavement, not genuine off-road recovery, Toyota was already fitting a real transfer case and locking differential four-wheel drive system into a commercial cargo van, a level of drivetrain seriousness competitors in Detroit and Cologne wouldn't approach for another decade, and in some cases never matched at all. The HiAce nameplate has now been in continuous production for over 50 years, and four-wheel drive variants remain available in multiple export markets today, still built on the same philosophy of over-engineering a van like it might need to survive a job site, rather than just a grocery run. It built its reputation the hard way. In mining camps across Australia, on farms throughout rural Japan, and on delivery routes stretching across terrain most vans were never expected to touch. And every time the segment tried to move past it, the HiAce just kept coming back for more, proving that the most overbuilt vehicle in a class isn't always the flashiest one. Sometimes it's just the one that refuses to stop working. Even the way Toyota marketed the four-wheel drive HiAce reflected this seriousness, positioning it within its commercial vehicle catalog rather than as a lifestyle trim. So here's a question worth sitting with. How many other vans out there had a genuine four-wheel drive option back in 1985 that you never even knew existed? Number 9, Mazda Bongo. The Bongo carries one of the most complicated badge histories of any van on this list. Sold at different points as a Ford Econovan, a Kia Bongo, and even briefly under Nissan, Mitsubishi, and Toyota badges around the world, all while staying fundamentally a Mazda underneath the sheet metal. The first 2 generations ran rear engine and then mid-engine, both rear-wheel drive only, but Mazda's 3rd generation Bongo launched in September 1983 and brought a genuine shift. Just over a year later, in November 1984, Mazda added a selectable four-wheel drive option paired with a proper low-range transfer case, turning a city delivery van into something farmers and tradespeople in Japan's snowier, mountainous regions could actually rely on. That four-wheel drive system stuck around for the rest of the 3rd generation's remarkably long 16-year production run, refined alongside a growing engine lineup that eventually included a 2.2-liter diesel and even a V6 petrol option. Most rivals in this class never bothered offering. Mazda didn't treat the four-wheel drive Bongo as a niche afterthought either. The system was offered across regular vans, the long wheelbase Bongo Brawny, and eventually the Bongo Friendy, the pop-top camper trim launched in 1995 that turned the Bongo into a genuine van life icon in export markets that had barely heard the name before. The Friendy's factory, auto-free top pop-up roof, let it sleep a small family without an aftermarket conversion, and pairing that camping-ready body with genuine four-wheel drive hardware and low-range gearing made it something closer to a factory-built expedition vehicle than an ordinary minivan. Bongo Turbo four-wheel drive variants, running the 2.5-liter turbo diesel, became especially prized among Japanese buyers who wanted genuine towing and hill-climbing capability without stepping up to a full-size van. Despite 13 different badges across its various generations and export markets, the third-generation four-wheel drive Bongo quietly built a reputation as one of the most versatile Japanese vans ever made. Equally at home hauling cargo through Tokyo traffic or climbing a snowbound mountain pass most rivals wouldn't attempt. Surviving four-wheel drive Bongos, especially Friendy campers, now command real money in grey market import circles across the UK, New Zealand, and North America. The Bongo Brawny long wheelbase variant carried the same four-wheel drive hardware into heavier-duty commercial work, giving tradespeople a genuinely capable option between the standard van and a full-size truck. Out of every badge this van has worn, Ford, Kia, Nissan, Mitsubishi, Toyota, which one genuinely surprised you the most? Number 8. Subaru Sambar van. The Sambar is one of the few K-vans in Japan to keep a rear-engine, rear-wheel biased layout, long after most competitors switched to front-engine designs, and that unusual architecture is exactly what made its four-wheel drive system genuinely effective, rather than a token option bolted on for a spec sheet. As kei-class four-wheel drive vans became a serious market segment across the 1980s and 1990s, Subaru leaned into its own engineering identity. The same symmetrical, all-wheel drive philosophy that defined its passenger cars from the Leon to the Legacy, and adapted that same thinking down to microvan scale, refusing to simply copy whatever the front-engine competition was doing. Most K-van competitors treated four-wheel drive as an afterthought, bolted onto a front-wheel drive platform, sending power rearward only when the front wheels started to slip. But Subaru's rear-engine layout meant the Sambar's four-wheel drive system had genuinely balanced weight distribution from the start, giving it traction characteristics that punched well above its 660 cubic centimeters displacement, especially in snow and loose gravel, where weight transfer matters more than raw horsepower. The Sambar also earned a reputation among Japanese farmers and delivery drivers for a low center of gravity that made it surprisingly stable on uneven terrain, a byproduct of that same rear-engine packaging that most competitors never bothered to replicate. The Sambar nameplate is still alive today, having outlasted nearly every rear-engine vehicle architecture in the automotive world, a layout Volkswagen abandoned decades ago, and most manufacturers never touched at all. Yet Subaru kept it running in a tiny cargo van long after everyone else moved on to safer, more conventional front-engine designs. Subaru also offered later Sambar four-wheel drive generations, with a limited slip differential option on select supercharged trims, a rarity in the K-van segment that further reinforced the model's reputation among Japanese farmers and rural delivery drivers. The Sambar's rear-engine layout meant Subaru had to route coolant lines the full length of the vehicle to a front-mounted radiator, a genuinely awkward plumbing job most front-engine competitors never had to solve. Even after Subaru eventually adopted a more conventional front-engine layout for later Sambar generations built alongside Daihatsu under a joint manufacturing agreement, the earlier rear-engine four-wheel drive Sambars remain the most sought-after by collectors, specifically because of that original, harder-to-replicate engineering approach. Between the Hijet and the Sambar, which one would you actually trust more on a muddy mountain road? Number 7. Nissan Prairie. Nissan planned a four-wheel drive Prairie from the very beginning of the program, but the original body shell simply wasn't rigid enough to handle the added stress of a transfer case and driveshaft. Engineers had to wait 2 full years and rework the structure before the four-wheel drive version could actually reach production, a genuine engineering delay rather than a corporate afterthought. When the XE four-wheel drive variant finally arrived in September 1985, it borrowed its rear axle directly from the Nissan Sunny four-wheel drive model, a genuine part-sharing solution rather than a cheap add-on, and it used a larger 2-liter engine to compensate for the added weight and drivetrain complexity that the original smaller engine simply couldn't handle. This was one of the first mainstream compact MPVs anywhere in the world with functioning sliding rear doors on both sides, and Nissan gave this innovation a proper four-wheel drive option nearly a decade before American minivan makers caught up on either front, let alone both at once. The Prairie's boxy, upright shape wasn't just a styling choice either. The tall greenhouse and flat floor were deliberately engineered to maximize interior space within Japan's strict compact vehicle dimension rules, meaning the four-wheel drive Prairie offered genuine SUV-adjacent capability without sacrificing the practicality that made it a hit with Japanese families in the first place. Sold in North America under names like Stanza Wagon and Access, before the Prairie name was eventually retired and folded into the Nissan La Festa lineage, this genuinely obscure four-wheel drive MPV pioneered engineering ideas the entire industry eventually copied, even as most drivers today have never once heard its name. While that first XE variant used a simpler part-time system, Nissan gave the second-generation Prairie, launched in September 1988 and marketed as the J7 Ateza in Japan, a genuine full-time version of the same Ateza all-wheel drive system Nissan was rolling out on the Bluebird and its performance cars, a real technology-sharing move rather than a marketing borrow. The Prairie's engineering team also had to solve a packaging problem unique to sliding door vehicles, routing the driveshaft and transfer case around dual sliding doors without compromising cabin space. Despite its commercial underperformance in North America, the Prairie's underlying engineering ideas quietly filtered into Nissan's later Serena and Elgrand vans, meaning this genuinely obscure four-wheel drive MPV left a lasting mark on the company's minivan lineup, long after its own name disappeared from showrooms. Do you remember this one being sold as the Stanza Wagon or the Access, or is this the first time you're hearing its name at all? Number 6. Subaru E12 Domingo. This genuinely obscure Subaru wasn't built from scratch. It's a stretched, re-engined version of the tiny Sambar K van, given a larger 3-cylinder engine borrowed from the Subaru Justy hatchback, just so it could legally exceed K-class size limits and compete as a proper compact van, rather than staying boxed in by Japan's microvan tax bracket. Launched in October 1983 and sold under a genuinely dizzying list of regional names: Domingo in Japan, Libero across most of Europe, Sumo in English-language markets, Combi in Belgium, even Columbus's in Sweden. This van proved Subaru was willing to badge engineer the same vehicle a dozen different ways just to find a viable market for its four-wheel drive engineering, rather than let it die as a Japan-only curiosity. Because the larger Justy-sourced engine had to be mounted in the rear, where the Sambar's smaller 2-cylinder unit used to sit, the power plant actually protrudes into the rear bumper, meaning basic engine servicing requires removing the bumper entirely, and a rear-end collision leaves the engine dangerously exposed in a way most manufacturers would never sign off on today. It also offered something genuinely unusual for a microvan of its era: selectable four-wheel drive operated via a gear stick mounted button, letting drivers choose rear-wheel drive for everyday commuting and switch to four-wheel drive the instant conditions turned rough, without a low-range transfer case complicating the system. Despite that bizarre packaging compromise, this van soldiered on for 15 years across multiple continents under more regional names than almost any other vehicle in Subaru's history, quietly outlasting the very market segment it was built for, before Subaru finally replaced it with the Forester, and later the Exige. Subaru also had to reinforce the Domingo's rear subframe to handle the added weight and torque of the larger Justy-derived engine, a modification considered essential for reliable four-wheel drive use. The Domingo's badge engineering sprawl wasn't purely cosmetic either. Each regional market received slightly different suspension tuning and gearing to match local road conditions, meaning the Libero sold in snowy European markets and the Domingo sold in Japan were mechanically calibrated somewhat differently, despite sharing the same basic platform underneath. Today, surviving Domingo and Libero examples are genuinely rare outside enthusiast circles, since most were used hard as delivery and utility vehicles, rather than preserved, making well-kept four-wheel drive examples a genuine unicorn on the used market compared to more commonly restored vans on this list. Out of Domingo, Libero, Sumo, and Columbus, had you ever heard any of this van's names before today? Number 5, Toyota TownAce. Toyota built the TownAce as a genuinely smaller, more affordable stablemate to the Hiace, yet gave it its own dedicated four-wheel drive system rather than simply badge engineering a downsized Hiace drivetrain and calling it a day. As Toyota's commercial van lineup expanded through the 1980s to cover every size class from K-adjacent to full size, the TownAce carved out its own middle ground niche, offering a genuine four-wheel drive option for buyers who needed more capability than a K-van, but didn't need the bulk, weight, or fuel bill of a full-size Hiace for their daily routes. Toyota engineered the TownAce's four-wheel drive system with a part-time transfer case that could be engaged on the fly in lower traction conditions, and paired it with a shorter wheelbase than the Hiace that made it noticeably more maneuverable on the narrow farm tracks and mountain switchbacks common across rural Japan. While it never earned the same overseas recognition as the Hiace or Delica, the TownAce quietly built a reputation across rural Japan, Australia, and Southeast Asia as a workhorse capable of handling terrain that plenty of larger, more famous vans would genuinely struggle with, all while remaining small enough to thread through gaps a full-size van simply couldn't fit through. It also became a favorite among Japanese vegetable and fruit farmers, precisely because of that combination. Enough cargo capacity for a harvest run, enough four-wheel drive grip for a muddy field access road, and a small enough footprint to park it right next to the crop rows. The TownAce nameplate remains in production today, decades after most of its Western minivan contemporaries were discontinued entirely. Still serving the same rural and commercial customers it was originally built for back in the 1980s. Toyota also offered the TownAce Four-Wheel Drive with a genuine dual-range transfer case on certain trims, giving it low-range gearing usually reserved for dedicated off-roaders. The TownAce's compact dimensions made it a favorite for Japanese fishing and camping outfitters too, who valued a van small enough to navigate narrow coastal access roads while still hauling gear and trailers through sand or mud that would bog down a larger vehicle. Export versions sold in select Southeast Asian and Pacific markets under local naming conventions picked up their own dedicated followings, with mechanics in these regions often praising the TownAce four-wheel drive's relative simplicity compared to more electronically complex modern all-wheel drive systems, making it easier and cheaper to keep running decades after production. Have you ever actually seen a TownAce outside Japan or Australia? Or does this one feel like a total unicorn to you? Number 4, Nissan Caravan. The Caravan is Nissan's oldest continuously produced full-size van nameplate, and Nissan added a genuine four-wheel drive option in October 1987 on the E24 generation, built specifically for Japanese commercial fleets that operate in mountainous, snow-heavy regions, where a two-wheel drive cargo van simply isn't a viable option for half the year. Sold internationally under the Uvan name, and built for decades as Nissan's direct answer to the Toyota Hiace, the Caravan carved out its own genuinely loyal following among delivery fleets, ambulance services, and rural operators who needed real load-hauling capability, paired with real winter traction rather than a badge that just sounded tough. Nissan engineered the Caravan's four-wheel drive system to work in tandem with a reinforced chassis, rated for higher payloads than many rivals. Despite going head-to-head with the far more internationally famous Hi-Ace for half a century, the Caravan has quietly outsold or matched it in several Asian and Middle Eastern markets, proving that Toyota's dominance in this segment was never as uncontested as most casual observers outside Japan tend to assume. The Caravan also developed a strong following among Japanese ambulance and emergency service operators, specifically because of its four-wheel drive variants, since rural clinics and hospitals needed a vehicle that could reach patients regardless of season or road condition. Still in production today, after more than 5 decades on the market, the Caravan remains one of the longest-running four-wheel drive capable van nameplates in the world, a genuine rival that never got the Western recognition its longevity actually earned. Nissan built the Caravan's four-wheel drive system around a genuinely robust part-time transfer case, shared in spirit with the company's patrol SUV lineage, giving fleet buyers confidence in a system built for genuine off-pavement use. The Caravan's reputation as an emergency service workhorse is well documented too. Nissan's own heritage archive catalogs dedicated ambulance-spec Caravans dating back to the 1970s, complete with stretcher mounts and warning light packages built to order for Japanese fire and medical services. Export markets in the Middle East also embrace the Caravan specifically for its ability to handle sand and loose gravel terrain, proving that the same drivetrain engineered for Japanese snow country translated just as effectively to entirely different, equally demanding conditions on the other side of the world. In a head-to-head between the Caravan and the Hi-Ace, which one would you actually put your money on? Number 3, Toyota Previa All-Trac. To make genuine all-wheel drive work in a minivan, Toyota mounted the entire engine on its side, tilted at a 75-degree angle, buried beneath the front seats rather than under a conventional front hood. An engineering decision made specifically to free up the driveline space the All-Trac system needed to route power to both axles at once. Launched for the 1991 model year as Toyota's answer to the Chrysler minivan dynasty, the Previa borrowed its All-Trac branding and locking center differential technology directly from the Celica GT4 and Camry All-Trac performance cars, giving an ordinary family hauler genuinely rally-derived four-wheel drive hardware most competitors wouldn't have dreamed of putting in a minivan. While Chrysler and Ford were still selling front-wheel drive only minivans as the unquestioned industry standard, Toyota engineers built a mid-engine, rear-wheel drive-based platform, specifically so a true all-wheel drive system could be layered on top of it, a level of engineering ambition no domestic minivan competitor even attempted during this entire era of the segment. The unusual mid-engine layout also meant routine maintenance, like oil changes and belt service could be done from inside the cabin through a removable panel, while heavier work still required a lift, a genuinely strange compromise that Previa mechanics either loved or hated, depending on the job in front of them. Even with a supercharged engine option, added late in its run specifically to offset the weight and complexity of the all-wheel drive hardware, the All-Trac Previa never sold in huge numbers against its front-wheel drive Chrysler rivals, but it left behind one of the most genuinely overbuilt drivetrains ever fitted to a minivan. Engineering so unusual that most owners today still don't fully understand how their own van actually works underneath them. Toyota's engineers also had to design a completely bespoke cooling system for the Previa's sideways mounted. The All-Trac system's electronically controlled center differential could be locked manually by the driver for genuinely low traction situations, giving the Previa a level of driver-controlled capability that most rival minivans, built purely for suburban pavement, never offered at all. Toyota's willingness to chase this level of engineering complexity in a minivan, of all vehicle categories, reflects a broader pattern across the brand's lineup during this era. Genuine performance-derived hardware, trickling down into the most ordinary vehicle segments imaginable, a philosophy few competitors were willing to match. If you've ever owned or driven an all-track Previa, what was it actually like living with an engine mounted sideways under your own seat? Number 2, Mitsubishi Delica Space Gear. Mitsubishi built the Space Gear generation of Delica with a genuine part-time and full-time four-wheel drive system shared conceptually with the Pajero SUV, giving an ordinary passenger van real off-road drivetrain hardware. Most competitors reserved exclusively for dedicated 4x4s and never brought anywhere near a family van. Launched in 1994 as the direct successor to the boxier first-generation Delica Star Wagon, the Space Gear kept the tall greenhouse and high-seating position that made the original famous, while modernizing the drivetrain and adding available diesel and turbo-diesel power plants aimed squarely at buyers who wanted genuine overlanding capability wrapped in a factory-built van rather than an aftermarket conversion. Mitsubishi also gave later Space Gear trims a genuine limited-slip rear differential option, a feature almost unheard of on a passenger van anywhere else in the world at the time, further blurring the line between minivan and SUV. This generation became genuinely beloved in export markets Mitsubishi never officially targeted at launch. Grey market Space Gears have developed dedicated cult followings in the UK, New Zealand, and increasingly North America, among buyers who want SUV-grade off-road capability without giving up minivan-grade interior space and seating flexibility. The Space Gear generation ran for over a decade in Japan, long enough to develop a dedicated global grey import community that still actively imports, restores, and modifies these vans today, decades after Mitsubishi itself moved on to the next Delica generation back home. The Space Gear also used Mitsubishi's Super Select transfer case, letting drivers shift between two-wheel drive, full-time four-wheel drive with an open center differential, and locked differential low range on the fly. The Space Gear's diesel variants, in particular, developed a strong following among long-distance overlanders, specifically because of their combination of genuine range, reliability, and low-range four-wheel drive hardware, a combination few factory vans anywhere in the world could match at the time of its production. Import specialists in the UK and New Zealand now routinely rebuild and restore Space Gears specifically for expedition use, treating them less like an ordinary second-hand van and more like a genuinely capable overlanding platform Mitsubishi never explicitly marketed it as. Parts availability remains surprisingly strong for a Japan-only model too, since so many Space Gears were sold across Asia and Oceania that a genuine used parts economy still supports owners running these vans hard decades after Mitsubishi stopped building them. Have you ever spotted a grey market Space Gear import in your area? And if so, where? Number 1, Mitsubishi Delica Star Wagon. The original Delica Star Wagon wasn't just offered with four-wheel drive as an option. Mitsubishi built the entire cab-over platform around a genuine part-time transfer case system from the very beginning, making four-wheel drive a core identity of the van rather than an afterthought bolted on for a higher trim package. Launched in 1986, riding on Mitsubishi's SUV-adjacent engineering knowledge from the Pajero program, the Star Wagon combined a tall, boxy body with a raised ride height and genuine low-range gearing in some trims, giving it real approach and departure angles that most vans of its era simply couldn't match on paper or in practice. Mitsubishi even offered a diesel-powered Star Wagon with genuine long-range fuel capacity, specifically aimed at buyers who wanted to drive this van deep into rural or mountainous terrain without worrying about finding a gas station along the way. While American and European minivan makers were still debating whether all-wheel drive was even necessary for an ordinary family van, Mitsubishi was already selling a cab-over people mover with true low-range four-wheel drive, hardware capable of tackling mountain passes, riverbeds, and unpaved roads that would strand a Dodge Caravan within minutes of leaving the pavement. The Star Wagon's boxy shape also gave it genuinely enormous interior volume for its footprint, letting owners haul camping gear, bikes, or an entire family's luggage without sacrificing the ground clearance that made the four-wheel drive system worth having in the first place. Nearly 4 decades later, the Star Wagon has become one of the most sought-after grey market imports in the world, commanding genuine cult status in the UK, New Zealand, and North America among buyers chasing exactly the kind of overbuilt four-wheel drive capability this van offered back in 1986, proof that some engineering ambitions age far better than the vehicles that first inspired them. Mitsubishi actually moved the Star Wagon away from a body-on-frame layout to a car-like unibody chassis, a deliberate break from the boxier, body-on-frame second-generation Delica that preceded it, yet the four-wheel drive hardware and low-range gearing carried over intact. Owners of well-preserved Star Wagons today often point to the sheer over-engineering of small details, reinforced door hinges, oversized brake components, as evidence that Mitsubishi genuinely built this van to survive conditions its competitors never anticipated. The Star Wagon's cult status has only grown as grey market import communities in the UK, New Zealand, and North America have shared restoration knowledge online. Out of everything on this list, what's the most overbuilt van feature you never expected to find in an ordinary factory people mover? 10 vans, 10 completely different ways. Japan decided a family hauler or delivery van should be able to handle terrain. No van has any business touching. We didn't even get to the Mazda Bongo, the Isuzu Midi, or the Nissan Urvan. Japan built way more overbuilt vans than one list can hold, so that one's coming next. If your favorite got left off this list, tell us below, and subscribe so you don't miss it.